Gordon Parks was born on November 30th, 1912, in Fort Scott, Kansas. He faced aggressive discrimination as a child. He attended a segregated elementary school and was not allowed to participate in activities at his high school because of his race. The teachers actively discouraged African American students from seeking higher education. Parks purchased his first camera at the age of 25 after viewing photographs of migrant workers in a magazine. Gordon Parks was a self-taught artist who became the first African American photographer for Life and Vogue magazines. He also pursued movie directing and screenwriting, working for the film The Learning Tree, based on a novel he wrote, and the movie Shaft. I did the photo The Doll Test, where psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark in the 1940s conducted a series of experiments known as the doll tests to study the psychological effects of segregation on African American children. The Clarks used 4 dolls, identical except for color, to test children's racial perceptions. The children between the ages of 3 to 7 were asked to identify both the races of the dolls and which colored doll they prefer. A majority of the students preferred the white doll and also gave them positive comments like good and pretty, and the black dolls as being ugly and bad. The Clarks concluded that prejudice, discrimination, and segregation caused a feeling of inferiority among African American children and damaged their self-esteem. One of the questions asked the kids to pick which doll looked like them. Some kids picked the black dolls just after being identified as the bad one. In the time, by 1914, every southern state had passed laws that created 2 separate societies, the black one and the white one. The combination of constant humiliation, poor economic opportunities, and segregated education for their children made thousands of African Americans leave the South in the Jim Crow era. Blacks and whites could not ride together in the same railroad cars, sit in the same restaurants, or sit in the same theaters. Blacks were denied access to parks, beaches, picnic areas, most hospitals, pretty much everywhere. Blacks, particularly in the South, faced discrimination in jobs and housing, and were often denied their constitutional right to vote through the literacy tests and poll taxes administered with informal loopholes and trick questions. Some states had curfews for African Americans, and sometimes they were restricted from even working in the same room as whites. In the 1940s, racial segregation by law was widespread and racial discrimination was common in the United States. Although the U.S. Constitution guarantees equal protection of the laws for all persons, the Supreme Court's interpretation at that time required only that the states or the federal government provide equal yet segregated facilities for whites and non-whites. So the doll test photograph shows us that segregation and discrimination not only affected what the blacks were allowed to do, it hurt their feelings also. These kids were made to feel bad about themselves because of their skin color. The results of the doll test study were used to prove that school segregation was distorting the minds of young black kids, causing them to internalize stereotypes and racism to the point of making them feel bad about themselves and hate themselves. Black children had internalized racism caused by being discriminated against and stigmatized by segregation. The study shows that stereotyping of black people as bad and white as nice and more desirable. In 1954, in Brown v. Board of Education, the doll test experiment helped to persuade the American Supreme Court that separate but equal schools for black and whites were not equal in practice and therefore illegal and against the law. This made the experiment even more controversial. It marked the beginning to the end of the Jim Crow laws.